Okay, so now we're starting to look at modifiable factors, and one of the unfortunate scapegoats that many of you will have had is that you'll have gone to your doctor and you'll have had your aches and pains and ailments attributed to stress. And one of the most unfortunate things that I experience is that hasn't been made as a tangible connection for most people to understand and make sense of how stress and what that even is connects to my back pain and all the other factors that may be going on in our life at the moment. And that's what this session is really all about, is to be able to understand and shift from stress. Well, I'm not stressed. Stop telling me I'm stressed, to appreciate stress physiology, because we're either in that or we're not, and how we experience that and how we feel and how it impacts us is going to be on an individual level. But I want you to picture that you're now sat at home and you're chilled out, maybe like I am sat here on this sofa. Life's good, all of your bodily systems are in balance and you're nice and relaxed. And then out of nowhere, a lion comes in out the corner of the room. Okay, so a big roaring African lion has just come in and you're in your living room. I want you to try and think, what would be your automatic response? What is your instinct to be able to do to the lion in the room? Okay, so you're probably thinking, well, I might shout, I might scream, or I might wet myself, I might try and run away from it. You're in a room and there's nowhere to be able to get away, you're going to roll over and die. We're probably going to try and put up some fight, which against a lion probably won't get you very far. But what you've just done there is to describe your fight or flight stress physiology, which is a system that we've evolved to be able to produce a response to save our lives. Without a stress response, we wouldn't be here today to have evolved in times gone by when we did have something like a lion or a predator to be able to chase us. In that instant, your heart rate, up or down, it's going to be through the roof. It's got to be able to get that blood around your body to the muscles to be able to fight it or to be able to run away. To be able to produce that, is your breathing going to increase or is it going to decrease? Of course, it's got to be able to increase to be able to meet the demand, to be able to get everything, primed for us to be able to produce this response. Eyes going to be wide or narrow. Probably going to be wide to be able to make sure we can see the threat and to be able to mount that fight or flight stress physiology response. So if we're able to say those main factors are what we're going to do when a lion comes into the room, what we're also going to be able to do is say some systems that we have that are probably not going to be important. Okay, and I'll fire some out and I'll offer you the thinking process to be able to see how helpful it would be, for example, for you to be digesting the breakfast you just ate. Well, lions chasing us, probably not important. Blood shifting away from my digestive system to my muscles, so my digestive system is not going to be prioritized. Not helpful, not going to save my life. What about sleep? Is it a good time to have a nap? Well, we just said that our eyes are going to be wide to look for the threat, so not going to be an important time to prioritize sleep. That's not going to save us. What about our libido? Probably not going to be something that we're going to be prioritizing our relationships or affection in the short term with the lion chasing us. What about pain? We talked about examples in the past where with a lion in the room and we tread on a rusted nail, would we feel pain? Potentially not. What about healing the cut on your leg? Is that going to be a priority when there's a lion chasing us? So healing is probably not going to be prioritized. Our immune system, dealing with a virus that's just got into our system or it's been in there, again, that's not going to be helpful for us in the short term, so that's probably not going to prioritize. And in doing what we've just gone through there, we have just been able to say the systems that are going to help save our life and also the systems that are going to get put on the back burner because they're not going to be helpful for us in the short term. And that's what you've got in your workbook, a series of little images where I want you to be able to gauge and build an understanding of which ones are going to help you save your life and which ones are not going to be important. From here, I'm going to segue into a story that I often tell to help get across something that is uniquely human compared to other animals. And I was watching a David Attenborough documentary several years ago. I'm a big fan of watching the animal documentaries, and on there was a situation where a wolf was chasing a rabbit. Now, in that moment, the wolf has to be able to catch the rabbit, because if the wolf doesn't catch the rabbit, it doesn't bring up its babies, doesn't pass on copies of its DNA, evolution, and so the story goes. So the wolf has to have heart rate up, breathing up, eyes wide, not prioritizing all the other things that we talked about to be able to fuel, get its sugars, adrenaline, all these hormones to be able to catch the rabbit. At the same time, the rabbit has to be able to get away from the wolf. So the rabbit has to get away from the wolf to be able to bring up its babies, to pass on copies of its DNA and evolution. So again, the rabbit has to be able to mount this full fight or flight stress physiology, heart rate up, eyes wide, breathing up, to be able to get this 30-second burst to get away from the wolf. Now, in this particular instance, the wolf doesn't catch the rabbit, and the point of this story was what I found most fascinating at the time was what happened 1 minute immediately after the chase. And that was that the wolf was back lying underneath a tree, going and ready to go to sleep, and the rabbit carried on eating grass as if nothing had happened. We as humans have the ability to mount the fight or flight stress physiology of the wolf and the rabbit to a lion chasing us, but also to the thought of a lion chasing us. Something that sets us apart is our bigger brain, and we've got higher centers of thinking that gives us the capacity to think about the future. That means that we have the capacity to mount the full fight or flight stress physiology to psychological inputs, which is something that is totally unique, where the wolf and the rabbit can kick in that fight or flight stress physiology orchestra, get that 30-second burst, and then they can equally turn it off. Or to the other end of the stress physiology continuum, which we call rest and digest. Now, what we evolved this for, which Robert Sapolsky tells, and he's someone who's really influenced our understanding on this, is for that 30-second burst. We have not evolved our stress physiology for 30-year mortgages. You know, and the longer, and if we are staying in fight or flight stress physiology, where we've got all these systems, heart rate, breathing, eyes dilated, are prioritized, and all the other systems, digestion, healing, libido, sleep, they're not prioritized. And we are in fight or flight stress physiology for a period longer than 30 seconds. And you'll know people, it could be yourself, where you have, you know, we all have different demands placed on us that are going to be giving us that fight or flight stress response. And remember, this isn't, oh, I feel stressed. This is a fight or flight stress response, or rest and digest. So you will have work, you will have family, you will have money, you will have the fact that I've got ongoing pain, or your own makeup of a metaphorical lion that is part of your life and following you around. And the longer that happens, that we don't strike a balance to be able to get out of that into rest and digest, just like the wolf and rabbit, those systems that were not prioritized to help save our life in the short term, like sleep, we know that is an enormously, it has an enormous relationship with persistent aches and pains. The fact of insomnia and how we don't sleep very well. Well, it doesn't make, you know, it's not surprising if our nervous system is wired to be able to be in protection mode based on different things that we've got going on in our life. So sleep becomes a symptom. We've got an entire section in this program around helping with sleep hygiene. Digestion. People will often describe irritable bowel syndrome, which is a diagnosis of elimination, whereby we rule out all definitive causes of digestive issues and end up with irregular stools. Well, again, that makes sense if our nervous system is in fight or flight and is not being given the chance to strike that balance. Libido, that can be hit if we're in long term and it's not being prioritized. And the one that we are really probably most interested in is muscular tensions. You know, I didn't mention it there before, but when a lion's chasing you, are we going to have tense or relaxed muscles? Blood flushing through to the big powerful muscles to be able to give you a fight or flight stress response. Probably going to be helpful to be able to get tense muscles to be able to get away. What is the impact of those tense muscles if we can't switch that off? If this is going on for periods of days, weeks, months, or even years, people can be in fight or flight stress physiology, and often those tensions in the muscles can be a really perpetuating factor in the aches and pains that you're experiencing today. Okay, so something that we are going to want to be able to do is appreciate how stress physiology is happening in you, and we're going to want to be able to make that connection so it makes sense, so that we can be able to appreciate how these factors that you're going to draw on your metaphorical lion. You notice in the workbook there is a word art of a lion with lots of common factors that we've put in there, but there will be ones that will be unique to you, and we will want you to draw those in, because once you appreciate and identify them, we can start to be able to strike the balance. But when we can then also see how this affects our physiology, it affects our hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, that will then impact our tissues where you can develop muscular tensions, and we have sore, sensitive and deconditioned tissues. This makes it make sense, and it makes it actionable for us to be able to start applying these concepts to be able to shift us from fight or flight stress physiology into rest and digest. Because remember, stress is not a bad thing. We can't live without stress. We wouldn't have got to this point and survived if we couldn't produce a stress response. When you train, when you have a deadline, you need that stress response. It's where productivity happens, but we also need to be able to shift that off, shift over and turn it off, just like the wolf and the rabbit. Now, an African lion doesn't come into the room. An African lion cub comes into the room. Is your response different to the big African lion? Now, unless you have a fetish around lion cubs, then you probably wouldn't freak out, and you may even go up and pet it. And this is a metaphor that we are looking to work through in these 12 weeks, is to take whatever is making up your metaphorical African lion and turn it into a lion cub. Make the threat smaller by understanding it, by dealing with an action in things that are in our control, to be able to increase our capacity to deal with day-to-day life. And that will include the burden of having back pain. So this is one of my favorite sessions to be able to go through when I work with clients around this, because if you can explain to somebody what you would do when an African lion comes into the room, and as a quick reminder, heart rate, what happens to that? Breathing, what happens to that? Eyes, what happens to that? You can also explain what isn't helpful when a lion comes into the room. Digestion, healing, immune system, libido, pain. And then I want you to be able to also write down and see if you can remember the relevance of my wolf and rabbit story. Stories tend to be sticky, and if you can write down the meaning of my wolf and rabbit story, and as a quick memory rejog, they can turn the fight or flight stress physiology on. They also can turn it off. Then it helps you to be able to write down as the third task or the fourth task in your workbook, what things are you going to do to action to get into your life to help you switch to rest and digest, or rest and relaxation. Because that's going to be completely unique to you, and it's going to put you in flow, in a state where nothing else matters. Okay, we've got practices, mind-body practices through this program that are going to help you to be able to explore, like yoga. That is a classic. Meditation, apps like Headspace, and different things that will be very typically related with stress, relaxation. But for some people that may not work. And just for myself, I have ADHD, where sitting still and meditating is the complete opposite for me. It's stressful. So what I've worked out through trial and error myself is that I have to be able to shift my focus onto something else for a period of time. And for example, through my studies, it was to be able to play musical instruments. I love walking and getting out into the countryside. For you, it may be seeing your friends. It could be watching something you could be watching something in the cinema. It could be your task is to write down the things that if you had, I'll put it this way, if you had half a day and you haven't got the kids, you haven't got work, you haven't got any of these things, and I'm going to ask you, what do you do for you? And unfortunately, for a lot of people, by the time they see me in person, when I ask them that, they've stopped thinking about themselves. They will say that they will be doing this for the kids, they will be doing this for work, and they've lost what it is that is really enjoyable just for the sake of doing it to them. So guess what? As part of this program, you're going to identify those, and then we're going to be programming or prescribing them back to you as important to get into your weekly schedule for the very purpose of shifting over to rest and digest to help balance stress physiology for you and all of the positive impacts of being able to increase your capacity to deal with the daily life that we all have. So this session was stress physiology. Take the time, have a cup of tea, write down what it is that's important for you so we can prescribe that back to you.